The man who wasn't supposed to win. Most people know him for his fists, for the speed, the kicks, the yellow tracksuit. But the real power of Bruce Lee? It wasn't in his muscles. It was in his mind. He was an immigrant, a Chinese man in Hollywood at a time when Asians were nothing but background characters or villains. He was too fast for the cameras, too intense for the screen, and too loud for the system. And yet, he didn't change. He made the world catch up to him. He wrote his own philosophy, built his own martial art, and turned a handful of films into a revolution. He didn't ask for permission. He became the standard. So the question is, how did he do it? And more importantly, what can we learn from a man who became a legend, not by following, but by breaking every rule he was given? Kick. Lesson 1. Born for greatness. There are people who chase greatness, and then there are people who are born into it, forged by fire, shaped by struggle, destined to ignite the world. Bruce Lee was one of them. He wasn't just a martial artist. He wasn't just an actor. He was a storm of philosophy, discipline, and intensity wrapped inside a 5/8 frame that could strike faster than the eye could register. But what most people forget is that Bruce Lee's journey to becoming a legend wasn't scripted. It wasn't easy, and it certainly wasn't guaranteed. Born in San Francisco in 1940 and raised in Hong Kong, Bruce was a child actor long before he was a martial artist. His father was a famous opera singer, and young Bruce appeared in over 20 films by the age of 18. But the streets of Hong Kong weren't a movie set. They were real, raw, dangerous, and Bruce, restless, fierce, full of energy, got into fights, a lot of them. It wasn't long before his parents enrolled him in martial arts training, not to make him a fighter, but to discipline him, to focus him. That's when he met his first real mentor, Yip Man, the legendary master of Ying Chun. Under Yip Man's guidance, Bruce began to transform, not just his technique, but his mind. He learned that true martial arts wasn't about overpowering others, but about mastering oneself. But even then, Bruce didn't just accept tradition. He questioned it, adapted it, made it his own. By the time he was in his late teens, his parents feared his temper and street fights might destroy his future. So they sent him back to America, alone, with just $100 in his pocket and a dream in his heart. He arrived in Seattle, working as a busboy and living in a small room above a restaurant. But even there, he stood out. Not because of how hard he worked, but because of how he thought. He enrolled in the University of Washington, studied philosophy, and began teaching martial arts on the side. This is where Bruce Lee began to show the world who he really was. He wasn't content with repeating old moves. He saw martial arts as a vehicle for self-expression, for breaking barriers, physical, mental, and cultural. And people began to take notice. His charisma was magnetic, his precision like surgery, his vision revolutionary. He wasn't just building a school, he was building a movement. And that movement was about to shake the world. The fire that couldn't be silenced. Bruce Lee was never just a fighter. He was a revolution. One punch, one philosophy, one decision at a time. After settling in the United States, Bruce opened his own martial arts school, the Junfan Gung Fu Institute in Seattle. But what made his approach radical wasn't just his technique. It was who he was willing to teach. In 1960s America, It was considered taboo, even unacceptable for a Chinese martial artist to train non-Chinese students. Many believed ancient martial traditions should remain within their own race and culture. But Bruce didn't believe in gatekeeping knowledge. He believed in truth, and truth, in his eyes, didn't have a color. When a group of traditional martial artists confronted him and demanded he stop teaching outsiders, Bruce refused. The dispute led to a fight, a private duel held behind closed doors. The condition? If Bruce lost, he would shut down his school. He didn't lose. But he also didn't celebrate. He was furious with himself. The fight, though victorious, had dragged on too long. It revealed inefficiencies in traditional techniques. That fight sparked something in him, the need to evolve. From that day forward, Bruce Lee stopped clinging to rigid forms. He began developing his own system, one that rejected dogma and embraced adaptability. He called it Jeet Kune Do, the way of the intercepting fist. It wasn't a style, it was a philosophy, a way of living, not just fighting. Absorb what is useful, discard what is not, add what is uniquely your own. While building his system, Bruce also built a life. He married Linda Emery, a white American woman, in a time when interracial marriages were still controversial. But Bruce didn't care for social norms. He cared for love, for loyalty, for shared values. Together they had 2 children, Brandon and Shannon. And though Bruce was often in the gym, pushing himself to new limits, he was also a present, engaged father. His family was his anchor. His training routines became the stuff of legend. He wasn't just fast, he was inhumanly fast. His famous 1-inch punch could send a grown man flying. He trained 6 hours a day, combining weightlifting, cardio, flexibility, and isometric strength. His body fat hovered around 5 to 6%. He'd punch for hours, kick until his legs went numb. And not because someone told him to, because he had to. It was in his blood. Soon, Hollywood came calling. But even that world didn't open its doors easily. In the early 1970s, Asian actors were rarely given leading roles. Bruce was offered minor parts, servant, sidekick, background fighter. He rejected them all. He knew his worth, and he wasn't willing to be reduced to a caricature of himself just to get on screen. So he returned to Hong Kong, only to find that he was already a star. Thanks to his earlier roles in childhood films and his growing reputation as a martial artist, the local studios welcomed him back with open arms. It was there that he filmed The Big Boss, Fist of Fury, and Way of the Dragon, the latter of which he directed himself, choreographing that now iconic fight against Chuck Norris in the Roman Colosseum. Each film was a statement, not just of skill, but of identity, of reclaiming Asian pride, showing strength without submission, elegance without compromise. And then came Enter the Dragon, his first major Hollywood production, his crossover moment, the film that would cement him as an international legend. It was released just 6 days after his death. Bruce Lee died at 32, a mystery, a tragedy, but what he left behind is immortal. His life was a rebellion, a refusal to accept what others called limits. He taught that the fight is never just about fists. It's about the walls we break, the truths we reveal, and the fire we carry even when the world tries to extinguish it. His legacy didn't end with his last breath. It began there. Because Bruce Lee wasn't trying to be a martial arts icon. He was trying to be himself, fully, unapologetically, universally. Lesson 2. Be Water, the philosophy of Bruce Lee. When Bruce Lee said, "Be formless, shapeless, like water," he wasn't just throwing around poetic words. He lived them. In this lesson, we don't just continue his biography. We dive into the very essence that made Bruce Lee not just a fighter, but a force, a symbol of a new way of thinking, moving, living. He spoke with his fists, but thought like a philosopher. Breaking dogmas. After the success of his Junfan Kung Fu School and first television appearances, Bruce started to see it. Martial arts had become rigid, like a museum. Style against style. Categories, hierarchies. But life doesn't work that way. He realized victory isn't in technique, it's in freedom. That's when he began creating his own, what he would later call Jeet Kune Do, the way of the intercepting fist. Jeet Kune Do is not a style. It is a process of self-discovery. He didn't want you to teach you how to fight. He wanted you to understand how to become yourself. Philosophy in motion. Bruce was obsessed, not with technique, with meaning. His journals weren't full of combat diagrams, but philosophical musings. He read Krishnamurti, Lao Tzu, Zen Buddhism, Nietzsche. He pondered what made a man free, what strength really was, why we feared being fluid. And he turned his body into a philosophical instrument. His muscles weren't just strong, they were aware. He said, "To hell with circumstances, I create opportunities." Bruce didn't adapt, he created. But rejection in Hollywood. But freedom is threatening. Hollywood, where he wanted to build a bridge between East and West, wasn't ready. He was pushed out, offered roles as servants, villains, caricatures of Chinese men. America wasn't ready to see a Chinese man as a hero. It was another wall, and he broke it. He went back to Hong Kong. There, he was embraced as a true star. That's where The Big Boss, Fist of Fury, and Way of the Dragon were born. Films where he became, for the first time, who he was in real life. A leader, an avenger, a philosopher with fists. I'm not in this world to live up to your expectations, and you're not in this world to live up to mine. Blast a deadly work ethic. He pushed himself hard, rehearsed scenes for 15 hours, wrote scripts, edited, trained. His wife recalled he didn't know how to rest. He was burning as if he knew time was short. And indeed, his time was. Bruce Lee died at the age of 32. His death remains mysterious. Some blame medication, others exhaustion. But everyone agrees he burned bright. Legacy. He didn't have much time, but he did enough to change an entire industry. Millions took up martial arts after his films. He inspired generations of fighters, thinkers, artists. But most of all, he left an idea. Empty your mind, be formless, shapeless, like water. You put water into a cup, it becomes the cup. You put water into a bottle, it becomes the bottle. Lesson 3. The Philosophy of Flow. How Bruce Lee changed the way we think about combat and life. Before he became a legend of the screen, Bruce Lee was already challenging the world, not just with his fists, but with his mind.
What made him so different wasn't just how fast he could kick or how powerful his punches were. It was how he thought about fighting and about life. In a world where martial arts were bound by tradition, hierarchy, and rigid rules, Bruce Lee broke the mold. He didn't just want to be the best fighter in a system. He wanted to destroy the system itself, not out of rebellion, but because he saw its limits. He understood something that few did. Real life isn't a choreographed kata. It's chaos. It's fluid. And to master it, you must become fluid yourself. That's where his famous philosophy was born. Be water, my friend. 3 words, an entire worldview. Bruce believed that water was the ultimate metaphor for how we should move, not just in combat, but in every moment of life. Water adapts, water flows, water crashes. It's humble, but it's also unstoppable. Think about it. Water doesn't resist. It doesn't argue with obstacles. It finds a way around them, or through them. That's how Bruce trained, how he fought, and how he lived. He watched traditional martial artists practice fixed patterns in formal stances, but he saw how stiff and predictable that made them. In a real fight, there's no choreography, no set sequence, no form to follow. Just reaction, instinct, awareness, presence. So, he created Jeet Kune Do, the way of the intercepting fist, a new philosophy of combat, stripped of tradition. It wasn't a style, it was anti-style, a rejection of form in favor of formlessness. He took what worked and discarded the rest. Wing Chun, boxing, fencing, judo, street fighting. He borrowed from everything. He merged the East and the West, and he constantly evolved, because that's what water does. It adapts to whatever vessel it's in. And this wasn't just about fighting. Bruce believed this was how we should live. Don't get stuck in one mindset. Don't let your identity become rigid. Stay open. Stay fluid. Stay curious. Absorb what is useful, discard what is useless, and add what is specifically your own. This wasn't just good advice for a martial artist. It was a blueprint for personal growth. He didn't want you to copy him. He wanted you to discover yourself, your own style, your own truth. He knew that true mastery wasn't about imitation, but integration, not about following footsteps, but carving your own path. That's what made Bruce Lee so revolutionary. He was a warrior, yes, but also a philosopher, a poet, a thinker. He read Krishnamurti. He studied psychology. He filled notebooks with reflections on life, death, pain, ego, fear. In one passage he wrote, "A teacher is never a giver of truth. He is a guide, a pointer to the truth that each student must find for himself." That's what he wanted to be, a guide, not a master on a pedestal, not a celebrity to worship, but someone who could spark the fire in others, who could challenge you to ask deeper questions. He wanted you to fight, but not just in the ring. Fight against limitation, against fear, against conformity, against the false identities that the world tries to impose on you. He believed every person had a warrior inside, not to destroy others, but to master themselves. And that mastery required one thing above all: presence. to be here, fully, in this moment. That's why he trained the way he did, not just to be stronger, but to be sharper, faster, more aware, to respond without hesitation, to move with instinct and intention, to flow with whatever came. Because life, just like combat, doesn't wait, it doesn't follow rules, and it sure as hell doesn't slow down for you. So what do? You flow. You stop clinging to the past. You stop fearing the future. You breathe. You move. You adjust. You trust yourself. You strike when it's time to strike, and you yield when it's time to yield. You let go of needing to control everything, and instead learn to respond to anything. That's what Bruce Lee taught us. Not just how to kick, but how to be. How to be water.
Lesson 4. The Final Fight. Legacy Beyond the Grave. They say legends never die, but Bruce Lee, he wasn't just a legend. He was lightning in a human body, and lightning never strikes the same place twice. By the early 1970s, Bruce Lee had conquered what once seemed untouchable. From being rejected by Hollywood for the color of his skin, he became the first Asian man to headline a major motion picture in the West. Enter the Dragon, released just 6 days after his death, was more than a movie. It was a cultural earthquake. It shattered stereotypes, inspired generations, and made martial arts a global phenomenon. But what people often forget is how close he came to never being heard at all. In 1970, Bruce suffered a severe back injury, a herniated disc during a simple warm-up exercise. Doctors told him he might never kick again. For most people, this would be the end, but Bruce wasn't most people. Bedridden for months, he did what only Bruce Lee could do. He trained harder, in his mind. He wrote The Tao of Jeet Kune Go during his recovery, blending philosophy, combat, and self-actualization into a blueprint of personal mastery. It wasn't just a book about fighting, it was about fighting limitations. His motto? Using no way as way, having no limitation as limitation. And he lived by it, until the very end. Bruce died suddenly on July 20th, 1973. He was 32. No scandal, no drugs, just an allergic reaction that led to cerebral edema. A freak, tragic, unexplained loss. A soul so powerful, his body couldn't hold it. But his death only amplified the power of his life. Because Bruce wasn't just a fighter, he was a disruptor. He punched holes through racial prejudice, outdated traditions, and limiting beliefs. He taught that your greatest enemy isn't inside, it's within. He inspired Schwarzenegger to start lifting, Jackie Chan to dream bigger, Dana White to create the UFC. Countless athletes, actors, thinkers, all credit him as their spark. And he did all this in just over 30 decades of life. So what does that tell us? That it's not about how long you live, it's about how fully. Bruce didn't wait for the world to give him permission. He didn't wait to be cast. He created his own roles. He didn't wait to be understood. He made them understand. He didn't wait to be saved. He became the one who saves. And that's your challenge. Not to become Bruce Lee, but to become fully, fiercely, unapologetically you. Your time isn't tomorrow. It's not someday.
It's now. The question isn't whether Bruce Lee was special. He was. The question is, what will you do with what he left behind? Will you just admire the legend? Or will you become your own?